there's been some really interesting signs and synchronicities from nature that you've encountered on your journey. Things like the enchanted lake to meaningful animals. Um, could you share a few standout moments where these signs led you to, some significant realizations of your own?
The one that comes to me that's I don't know why, but when you asked that particular question, I remember this meditation I was doing early on in Sedona, where I was sitting. This is what I do every morning. I'd wake up and I do a particular meditation to kind of tune in to my higher guidance. And I didn't intend to, but I was just so excited to do it every day that I would just do that first. I'd maybe use the bathroom or get a drink of water, but then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this meditation. Um, Years later, I realized the first time I missed it, I realized, oh, I made it over 500 days doing this meditation before I took a day to take a break. Not because I ever set out to, like I never would have picked that number. It's a crazy number, but because I was just excited. I was just following my dreams. It was exciting. I was following my heart and my passion. And in this meditation, one day I was tuning in, and I saw this like me that's to me at the time it felt like, oh, this is me in a past life. I'm some kind of like monk or something, and I'm in this cave, and I know I'm getting ready to die, and so I feel myself like releasing out of the body and becoming this bird, and I'm flying and I'm soaring around, and like just this really amazing experience, right? I was like, wow, this is so great. And it was all very experiential, right? My meditations are not abstract. Very tangible. And I don't do drugs. I never have, but you would think so if you listen to my stories, right? And I just don't need drugs. I get that naturally. and and right? And so I'm flying along, and then from this bird's eye view, I notice like, oh, this looks kind of familiar. Like I had just moved into Sedona, but I was like starting to notice, I think I'm in Sedona. And then I was like zooming in, flying down on something, and I thought, oh, that's the house that I just rented. And just at that moment, this shadow comes over my eyes. And I was sitting looking out the window in my bedroom, and I open my eyes, and this bird is flying directly from the sun directly to me. Right? And this bird is flying right here, and then it like veers off, and then boom, the sunlight hits me right straight in the eyes, full open, and I get this huge burst of information from this other me. Just everything that had happened, and I would just sit. I was just my body's shaking, and I'm laughing. I'm like, I'm definitely gone crazy now, Feels so good, and just all the information coming in, and it was I don't know. I just thought of when you said animals, connect with animals, like somehow that being in nature, um, being in that environment, brought me that experience. But uh, that's how my energy world and my physical world always overlap. It is the strangest thing. I'm imagining I'm this bird flying, and then suddenly I open my eyes, and the bird I was imagining I was is flying toward me. It's just like, okay, it's when you start tuning into that stuff, you're like, obviously something's happening. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried, you know, and it blows you away. But you have to sort of give yourself room, make a little space to have these far out or deep in experiences, you know? Yeah.
I love that. I'm realizing this far into the conversation that we haven't really taken the moment for the layperson to tune in and understand, because you actually worked for the US Department of Energy at some point. It's like, huh? What sort of energy is going on in the US government? But there are, like, when you're referring to energy, I think there's the layperson conversation around energy, which is, and not to talk down on that, it's just the like you said, mainstream is not cutting edge. The sort of mainstream conversation around energy, which is, fuel in society. And then there's some people have a personal conversation around energy, which is energy levels, which is vitality. But then there's a conversation that you're having around energy, which is, more based on intuition and spiritual dialogue with oneself, I feel. Can you sort of center us in the conversation around what energy means to you?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, all those things are true, right? It's a very broad word. which is why it's great, right? So, but when I'm talking about energy, I'm not really talking about like wind power or electricity or these things, although that's probably that's a great use of that word too. But I'm talking about more subtle energy, and the reason I use that word is that it's uh, using the five senses that we're used to sensing material things. So I'm used to like touching and tasting and seeing and hearing and smelling and these sensory things. I'm used to using them to on the material world, but there is more of you that's not localized in time and space than there is that's localized. Your body is the only part of you that's localized in time and space, right? So your senses also work in this broader manner, right? And so there isn't a good word for this because when you're really tuned in, you're not really in the world of language and words anyway. So by the time you put it into words, it's filtered down. So energy for me is just the word for these non-material things that we can sense, whether we're sensing it with our in a touchy-feely way, we're touching it, smelling it, seeing it, or imagining we're seeing it, or hearing voices, or if it's just a knowingness, which is a knowingness is really sort of the non-localized version of thought. Like we're used to thinking about things, but knowingness is like, oh, I just got this insight, I just know something. And then somebody says, well, walk me through the steps. Why do you know it? Like, well, there weren't really any steps. Like, I didn't know it and then I did. Well, that doesn't sound very reasonable.
Yeah.
So let's try it out. Like, let's try out these things that I just somehow knew were true. And if you experiment like this, you start to build up and you'll start to find out that, yes, sometimes I'm engaged in wishful thinking. Okay, that's true. Sometimes I'm actually getting amazing insights that are true beyond what I could reasonably come up with. And the more you practice, the more you learn to differentiate. Like that, it's okay. It's okay that sometimes we're all engaged in wishful thinking. It's okay that sometimes we can fool ourselves. These are all things are all okay, and it's also okay that sometimes we're not. Right? It's that sometimes we're actually tuning in and catching stuff. That's okay too. Yeah.
I find that to be one of my deepest fascinations is just coaching people, which is it feels quite 3D at times, because there's a sense of these are the goals, these are what I want, and there is a whole, you can argue, it's Amaret Touchwood, so maybe there's some intuitive aspect to it, but nonetheless, it can be quite 3D, in people reaching for their desires. But sometimes there is this word that I see surface its head around again and again and again. And people don't always use the word intuition, but there's this knowing. It's like, oh, I just know that's what I'm meant to do. Or there's a knowing that this is for me. Or, and it's like, tell me more about that. And there's always this deep curiosity for me around
knowing
this sense of knowing, because we may be alien to the concept of intuition, but somehow we're somewhat okay with just, oh, I just know.
Right.
I hear that still present for the layperson. Touch wood.
Yeah. I'd say, I have to borrow kind of from my wife's vocabulary for this. Is that I'd say that knowingness is really when you're remembering that you can also use the spirit mind that you have. That's aware of everything. There's no distance between you and the information and time and space and other people and so on. So that's that when you can realize that or remember that, that's when you just boom, you just know things, and you don't need to explain it because for you, it's true. But I would say to like this is very different from the things that you're dogmatically positioned about, right? So there's a lot of things that we're like, well, this is right and that is wrong, and there's no way you're going to convince me otherwise. That is not knowingness, right? That is dogmatically positioned beliefs, and that's fine. But just don't, doesn't mean they're true. No matter how much I think something's true or false, doesn't mean it's true or false for me, and it certainly doesn't mean it's true or false for anybody else. So it's really different. A lot of people have experienced uh, this kind of knowingness. I'm right. Damn it, I know I'm right. Like a lot of people have experienced this, but we're talking about a different kind of knowingness, a knowingness of like, oh, that's how things are. Uh, it's not good or bad or right or wrong, or I don't have to preach it or teach it or anything. I just noticed something. Oh, that's fascinating.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. This point is actually part of a wider conversation that I had with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check out that full conversation here now.